I mean, you should just like give it a try, man. I mean, it's such like a good speed game. The movement's like incredible. Like it's so simple that like beginners can pick it up, but then like it gets so in depth with the movement mechanics that like it's super hard to master.
Dude, what are you talking about? Aren't the controls just like spin and jump?
All right, well, there's more to it than that, you stupid motherfucker.
Let's talk about the basics. For starters, yes, the inputs are very simple. Rotate left, rotate right, and jump. Whether you're using a controller or a keyboard, Pogostuck has some pretty basic controls on a surface level. On keyboard, you can rebind buttons, but most people tend to stick to one hand on A and D to rotate and the other hand on spacebar to jump. On controller, I use left stick to rotate and A to jump. So let's point out a couple basic mechanics. First, the longer you hold A, the higher your character will jump. Then, if you do a flip of 270 degrees in either direction, your Pogostick will show sparks and you will get a boost which will allow you to gain even more height on the next jump. Pretty basic stuff. The catch is, if any part of your character's hitbox comes in contact with the terrain, you will bonk and receive knockback in the opposite direction from the angle of that terrain. To counteract this, you want to aim to land the tip of your Pogostick onto the terrain on each and every jump, in order to avoid bonking and losing control of your character. You'll notice that as soon as you load into the game, without touching any controls, your character is already moving. This is one of the major mechanics that makes Pogostuck so difficult. Unless you pause the game, your character will freely bounce or bonk, even without inputs. On top of this, even when you are inputting jumps, there is always a time limit on how long you can be on the ground. Now, there are a couple factors that alter this length of time you can be on the ground. The obvious influence would be how long you input jump. The longer you hold jump, the longer you'll be on the ground building height. Landing with a boost increases this length on the ground slightly as well. And lastly, the height you fell from before landing adds to the time you are stuck on the ground, making reacting to big falls and hitting recoveries a bit easier. This is what makes Pogostuck a game that tests your reaction time. You only have a short window consisting of your air time and landing time in order to properly angle yourself for the next jump. As you can see, that's not a lot of time to react. Okay, so to recap so far, you move with the left, right, and jump input where you have a limited time to angle yourself before jumping. Then you want to always land Pogostuck down to avoid bonking before angling your character properly in the short time window of a jump input. You want to be flipping almost every jump to get a boost to gain more height, and you can't take a break unless you pause because your character is always moving. Okay, nice. Now let's talk about the physics at work in this game. Now there's obviously gravity, and it's pretty intuitive. You will arc through the air and fall downwards towards the ground. Okay, good, we all understand gravity. Now let's talk about math. In mathematics class, I learned about this neat thing called the x-axis. Let's call a flat slope of land the x-axis. A half circle resting on top of the x-axis would be equal to 180 degrees. This is your range of angles to jump at for that slope. If I jump 90 degrees, aka straight up, I go straight up and come back straight down. Simple, right? That's how gravity works. But if you change the slope and keep the x-axis flat and jump straight up, things change a bit. Depending on the slope's angle, when you jump straight up, it will send you the way the slope is opening up to. Meaning if I have a diagonal slope this way and jump straight up, I'm going to be sent slightly left. And the opposite slope will send me slightly right. The amount of distance it sends you in either direction is determined on how steep the slopes are. So why do you need to know this? Because in your brain and muscle memory, you need to take these factors into consideration and adjust your jumps and Pogostick placement for them. On the hill and twin trees section, you have slopes like this as well as wind pushing you, so you can't just jump at a slight angle and get up there. You have two factors working against you, so you have to adjust your jump angle and Pogo placement to work around these factors. Now think about ice in Pogostuck. With a limited jump window and your character sliding along the ground in that window, you have to react to an ever-changing angle due to your character moving position, the slope changing, or both. Pogostuck is truly a game of rapid calculations with a limited time to react. There's also the mechanic of stored height in your jumps. What I mean by this is the higher you fall down from, the more powerful your next jump back up will be. This is what allows for recoveries to happen in Pogostuck. If you fall from a great height, you have the chance to use your skill and precision to land yourself and angle yourself properly. Then, using that stored height, you can boost all the way back up, saving you some progress. Throughout the level design in Pogostuck, there are certain jumps and speedrun routes that will make use of this height storage, making you go down a distance just to come back up the same distance on the next jump to clear a gap that couldn't just be strictly cleared horizontally. One of the most simple skills anyone can learn in Pogostuck is just by not full hopping every jump. With times at the top getting extremely tight, a lot of runners will use half jumps or short hops to set up other jumps or cut air time to go faster. In your full jump input window, you can let go of A at any point to get a different level of height. People use this to their advantage to cut out as much airtime as possible, saving milliseconds in the speedrun. If you know a jump does not need a full boost to set up the next full boost, you might short hop a flip to get into a better position to make a larger jump from a better landing position. Speedrunners will also mix in no boost full hops that are actually quicker than going for a flip in some circumstances. They also use calculated bonks in spots where using a bonk is actually a quicker setup for an angle on the next jump. The next mechanic speedrunners use is what I like to call reaching. When trying to do sections as quickly as possible and as little jumps as possible, speedrunners will often reach the tip of their pogo further ahead on the object they're landing on, and then pre-hold a direction right when they're about to land to get a few inches further. You can do this and also still hit the correct angle to clear the next gap in one jump without a setup jump. In BBC, aka Bob's Bonkless Coal, you'll see players waiting to reach while they fall to clear this right wall. Then, they will reach into the gap to grab further into this opening before rotating to the best angle to shoot straight over the vulture. Impressive tech skill. They'll also use this in wrap jumps. The most notable examples are in Ship Skip and Yuzume Skip on map 3. The player, while rotating, goes upside down to not bonk on the ledge and then rotates to reach and grab the top of the platform. The last thing you might see speedrunners do is called over-rotation. The biggest example of this happens at the end of map 2. When wall jumping from these pillars, you'll find it takes less than 270 degrees of rotation to flip from one wall onto the next with the perfect angle. Now there's 3 of these walls in a row, so if you land on the wall with the perfect angle to lead into the next jump, you'll oftentimes notice that you'll land without a boost. So to hit the wall and still have boost to lead into the next jump, speedrunners will over-rotate to get a boost, and then before they stick to the wall or after they stick to the wall, they will counter-rotate to get back onto the perfect angle to boost to the next wall. This section requires doing it 3 times in a row to avoid having to flip back down if you don't get the boost, which wastes a lot of time. Okay, now let's talk about advanced speedrunning mechanics. The first is egg jumps or tilt jumps. You'll see this being used at the end of map 1 speedrun or the beginning of map 2 upside down speedrun. The tech involves the player landing at a shallow angle and rotating their character back to straight in the short window of a full jump input. This technique gains the player a slight increase with every jump. It allows players to skip using the egg to get to the finish line on map 1. The reason this happens is because you're basically tricking the stored height system into thinking you're falling a further distance. By landing sideways as opposed to landing straight, you're getting this slight difference in distance fallen, which gives the player extra height. This can be chained a couple times to gain some major height, but this trick is also used in individual moments to gain a slight height increase. The best example I can think of is the transition on map 3 from Bone to Pelican. Sua uses an egg jump to gain just a bit more height to help him ascend a bit higher when going into the Pelican section. Okay, this piece of tech is a little tricky. It's primarily used in Anvil Skip and involves a little bit of a wall slide or clip. Supercool calls it glide, and for some reason on certain corners, most prominently this one during Anvil Skip, you can essentially hug the wall and ignore bonking and sort of slide along the corner. Supercrew says it has something to do with an unfixable issue in the collision system, where you would stick to the wall and not bonk. So, to fix this, Supercrew implemented what he called a glide parameter, which is what is going on here at Anvil Skip. If you come into contact with a wall in less than 125 milliseconds of time, you will slide along the wall and not bonk. I assume that since you are hugging this wall in Anvil Skip from the second you leave the ground, it allows you to glide up the wall, keeping your angle and not bonking you. Quite possibly the most advanced mechanic in Pogostuck speedrunning involves using egg jumps and over-rotation while upside down. It's called the ceiling jump. It is primarily used in branch skip on map 1. It involves jumping to this wall and up to the ceiling at this slight angle and jumping outward with enough airtime to flip right with an over-rotation to get the boost, then rotating back into an upwards position to gain enough height to grab the tree branch. The trick to this tech is to use half jumps when jumping from the wall to the ceiling and then from the ceiling back to the ground. Half jumping off the ceiling allows you to fall slower with less momentum than if you had full jumped. This allows you to have more airtime to rotate and get a boost and in turn gain more height. Like I said, this is probably the most advanced technique in the game. We see Supercrew introduce this mechanic in map 2 with the dragon jumps, but that version is only a slight boostless height increase using the ceiling. This advanced mechanic is ridiculous, but regardless, it's still a consistent strategy used at the top level. So, now that you know everything about the movement mechanics and physics of Pogostuck, you can properly appreciate the beauty of this movement game. In addition to these mechanics, the game's map design also throws things like bouncy mushrooms, ice, water, rings, frogs, gravity orbs, moving bees, thorns, rotating pillars and cogs, a deadly axe, sap, honey, coconut cum, purple slime, water slides, boost juice, breaking blocks, wind, and the egg. They all change and alter your movement and jumps to create fun and intricate changes to the calculations you have to make in between jumps. It all makes perfecting a speedrun in Pogostuck extremely fulfilling and exciting. If you want to see how all these techniques are used in every section of the Pogostuck speedruns, hit subscribe because I'm going to react to all Pogostuck's regular world records in some future videos. Thanks for watching.